On the day my wife gave birth to the child of her terminally ill first love, my father-in-law and mother-in-law had 10 thugs stationed outside the delivery room. But even after the delivery was over, I never caused a scene. My mother-in-law held my wife's hand and sighed. "Laura, don't worry. As long as we're here, we won't let him get anywhere near you. Your dad even brought people to guard the hospital entrance. If he dares to try to stop you from giving birth, we'll call the police." My wife, pale and weak, nodded slightly, yet she still instinctively glanced toward the elevator. When she saw nothing but an empty hallway, she finally let out a sigh of relief. She couldn't understand it. All I had ever wanted was to help her leave a legacy for the man she truly loved. Why couldn't I understand that? As she looked at the nurse holding her crying baby, she smiled contentedly. My dear viewers, you are not just my viewers, you are my family. This channel belongs to all of us, and we can only grow it by supporting each other and moving forward together. Now, let's show our power. Our target is to reach 1,000 subscribers in just 5 days. I truly need your support. Please subscribe, share the videos, like, comment, and stay connected with us. Every single person matters and brings us one step closer to our goal. Let's prove what we can achieve together. Target: 1,000 subscribers in 5 days. Thank you so much for your love, support, and trust. Let's make it happen together. She thought that if I visited her the next day, perhaps she could forgive me for all our previous arguments. She even thought she would allow me to become the child's father. But what she didn't know was that I had just submitted my report to the United Nations. 7 days later, I would give up my nationality, become a stateless doctor, and never return. Chapter 1: The day Laura left the confinement center, I had just finished my shift at the hospital. As I approached the door, I could already hear laughter and cheerful voices coming from inside. "This child is so beautiful. Those big eyes are definitely his father's best feature." My mother-in-law happily played with the baby in her arms while James walked out of the kitchen carrying a steaming bowl of chicken soup. "I made this soup myself. You're still weak, so you need to nourish your body." He sat beside Laura on the bed and gently fed her, creating a warm and loving family atmosphere. My father-in-law was holding a rattle, laughing so hard that his mouth practically wouldn't close. "This child is really adorable, just like his father. Fortunately, he isn't like that silent Claude. Having a doctor for a father would be such a headache." My hand tightened around the door handle. I remembered the first time I had met my father-in-law. He had patted me on the shoulder and told me that being a doctor was an honor for the entire family. Saving lives and healing the wounded, he said, was something to be proud of. He had even told me that he used to be a doctor himself. If it hadn't been for an injury caused by a medical dispute, he would never have retired so early. But now he was saying that doctors didn't deserve to have families. I had only taken a year off to pursue further studies. Yet this family had already become completely intolerant of me. I lowered my head bitterly and pulled the corners of my mouth into a faint smile. I had been married to Laura for 3 years. She had always told me that she didn't want children. I understood her concerns because giving birth could be dangerous, so I had never pressured her. I still remembered the day I left for my studies abroad. She had cried her eyes out, telling me how much she would miss me. After that, we talked every day and shared everything about our lives. Even our colleagues used to joke that despite being married for 3 years, we still acted like a young couple who had just fallen in love. But 1 month ago, when I finally took leave and returned home, I found Laura standing beside her first love, with a huge pregnant belly. My thoughts were interrupted by James's voice. "Claude, when did you get back? Why are you just standing there at the door?" As soon as he spoke, everyone else in the room turned toward the entrance. When my father-in-law noticed the resignation letter in my hand, his expression immediately darkened. "How did I ever let you marry my daughter? What a disaster. Now you're even quitting your job. Are you planning to live off us old people? Is this how a husband is supposed to behave?" My mother-in-law immediately joined in. "You quit your job? You couldn't even hold on to your good position, and now you're wondering what you're going to do? If you don't work, how is this family supposed to survive? Laura's health is fragile and the baby needs money. Are you planning to let the three of us starve? I couldn't help finding their words amusing. Whoever the wife and child belong to, it's their responsibility to support them. Claude, what did you just say? Don't you have any sense of responsibility? Laura finally couldn't take it anymore. Her eyes turned red as she shouted at me. In her agitation, she clutched her chest and coughed violently. If James hadn't saved me from that car accident 3 years ago, I would have died a long time ago. Both of his parents are dead, and now he's been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Soon, no one will remember him. Why do you always target him? Do you really think I'm that dirty and vile of a woman in your eyes? James looked at Laura with an expression full of pain, gently trying to calm her before turning his gaze toward me. Claude, you should say less. I know this is all my fault. I promise I'll never show up in your life again. But please, don't let me affect your relationship with Laura. All right? I looked at the four of them standing united against me, and strangely, I felt even more amused. So this was what a real family looked like. Just then, Laura spoke up. Her voice was cold and stern. Claude, my patience has limits. If you ever target James again, don't bother coming back to this house. Then she added coldly, if you want to stay married to me, you'd better keep quiet. Next week, at the full-month celebration, I'll announce in front of all our relatives and friends that you are the father of the child. Next week? I glanced at the baby, who was already fast asleep in the stroller. By then, I would already be on my way abroad. But before I left, I didn't mind giving them an unforgettable surprise. Without changing my expression, I simply nodded. Okay. Chapter 2. After saying that, I didn't care about their reactions. I turned around and went straight back to the bedroom to pack my things. Since I had already decided to leave for good, I didn't want to leave anything behind. The laughter and cheerful voices from the living room drifted through the bedroom door. For a moment, my hands froze as I folded my clothes. Then I heard Laura's voice. James, I want to use your surname for this child. That way, even if he calls someone else Dad in the future, he'll always remember that you're his true father. Even though I couldn't see her face, I could easily imagine the deep affection in Laura's eyes as she said those words. And my heart, it was already torn apart, covered in wounds. Suddenly, I remembered the day I had rushed home last month. I was still carrying a souvenir I had bought abroad especially for Laura. But when I reached the door, I saw Laura and James returning from a walk together, their hands tightly clasped. Laura's face was filled with fear. James, on the other hand, looked at me with confusion and even asked whether I had come to the wrong door. I didn't say a word. My eyes were fixed on Laura's enormous pregnant belly. I had been away for 11 months, yet my wife was 8 months pregnant. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't deceive myself into believing that child could possibly be mine. It wasn't until Laura hurriedly stepped in front of James and introduced us. This is my husband, Claude. I thought James would back away after hearing that. Instead, he acted as if he were the man of the house. He casually invited me inside and told me to sit down. As we brushed past each other, he leaned closer and whispered so quietly that only the two of us could hear. I heard you're quite a bit older than me, so I'll call you Big Brother. After all, the child in your wife's belly is mine. My chest burned with fury. I couldn't hold myself back anymore. I punched him hard in the face. At that moment, I completely lost my rationality. All the longing I had felt during those 11 months away from Laura suddenly transformed into pure rage. If I had been holding a knife at that moment, I might actually have killed the two of them. The neighbors heard the commotion and called the police. We were all taken to the police station. But since it was considered a domestic matter, the police couldn't interfere and eventually allowed us to return home. As soon as we arrived, my in-laws came rushing over after hearing what had happened. They didn't ask me a single question. Instead, they immediately started yelling at me. They scolded me for causing such a scene and embarrassing them in front of the neighbors. They even accused me of wasting all those years of education and reminded me that I should never have raised a hand against anyone. They warned me that if anything happened, they would never let me off the hook. That was when I finally learned the truth. They had known about Laura and James all along. Not only had they known, they had actually supported their relationship. In just 1 year, James had become the perfect son-in-law in their eyes. Meanwhile, I had been kept completely in the dark. I felt nothing but bitterness. My heart was heavy with pain. Laura slowly walked over to me, her hands trembling as she tried to take mine and persuade me. I never meant to betray you. James is in poor health. The doctor says he only has 6 months left to live. I couldn't bear the thought of him dying without leaving behind a legacy. She paused before continuing. I thought about talking to you about it before, but you were abroad. I didn't want to trouble you or interfere with your studies, so I decided to wait until you came back and then discuss it with you. Then she looked at me and carefully asked, if you're willing, could we raise this child together? Having a child was such a huge decision. Yet somehow, coming from Laura, she made it sound like it was nothing more than a simple request. I packed the last of my clothes into my suitcase just as my mother-in-law pushed the door open. She glanced down at the suitcase at my feet, then forced a polite smile. Since you've been gone, I've been letting James sleep in your room. And now the study has been turned into a nursery. So tonight you'll have to make do and sleep in the living room. Or you can stay at a hotel. I was exhausted. I didn't even have the energy to go out and look for a hotel. I simply nodded and prepared to spend the night on the couch. But in the middle of the night, the sound of a baby crying echoed from the bedroom. I rolled over, ready to put in my earplugs. Then I heard Laura complaining. You need to do something about the baby, or he's going to keep crying. James answered lazily, you're the baby's mother. Just take care of him. Let the kid cry a little longer. It's good for his lungs. Laura gave a light laugh. You're so annoying. A moment later, I heard the unmistakable creaking of the bed. I pulled the blanket over my head, desperately trying to block out those unbearable sounds. But the moment I closed my eyes, an image of Laura from years ago appeared in my mind. Back then, she had been so pure and beautiful. Her heart and her eyes had been filled with nothing but me. But that version of Laura no longer belonged to me. Chapter 3. I spent the entire night in a daze. By dawn, I was already leaving the house with my suitcase. I went to the authorities to deregister my household registration and completed the necessary procedures for leaving the country. Because I already had government-approved documents, everything went smoothly. The staff didn't ask me many questions. Just as I was about to leave, one of them suddenly called me back. She handed me a small piece of fruit candy. May all your wishes come true. I smiled at her reassuringly. Then I left and found a nearby hotel. After dropping off my luggage, I was about to go out and grab something to eat when I unexpectedly ran into Laura, James, and their 2 children. James was wearing a custom-tailored Armani suit. He looked radiant and healthy. There was absolutely no sign of a man who was supposedly dying from terminal cancer. Claude, I saw you from a distance just now and thought it was you. He glanced at Laura with a smile. Laura was saying it couldn't possibly be you here. Then his eyes fell on the recruitment flyer in my hand. A knowing smile spread across his face. Claude, so you're out here looking for a job? But with your frail body, aren't you just going to make yourself suffer carrying bricks at a construction site? I didn't respond. The flyer had only been handed to me moments earlier by a young girl on the street. I had seen her standing in the cold winter air, handing out leaflets, so I casually accepted one from her. When I remained silent and simply clenched the flyer in my hand, James's laughter became even more mocking. If you'd told me you were looking for a job earlier, maybe I could have helped you. We're all family, right? If you're doing well, Laura's future will be secure too. Then I can finally rest easy. At that moment, my silence was basically an acceptance of everything he had said. Laura, who had looked confused a moment earlier, suddenly changed. Her expression hardened. She frowned tightly, and contempt filled her eyes as she looked at me. What's there to introduce? He chose to quit a good job as a doctor. Even if he ends up starving on the streets, he doesn't deserve anyone's sympathy. Then she looked directly at me. Claude, you really have no sense of responsibility. Do you think behaving like this will make me give up on the child? I stared at her familiar face. Yet at that moment, she felt like a complete stranger. I remembered when we had first gotten married. There had been a time when I considered resigning and changing careers because of the internal competition at the hospital. Laura had simply held me in her arms, gently patted my back, and whispered in my ear, "We are one. No matter what decision you make, I'll support you. Resigning isn't a big deal. I believe our future will shine. Husband, I'll always be by your side." But the woman who had once promised to stand beside me no matter what was now standing there, allowing another man to humiliate me. It was as if she had completely forgotten the words she once said, forgotten the deep feelings we once shared. Even my in-laws were shaking their heads in disappointment. I must have been blind before. How could I have trusted you with my daughter's future happiness? Luckily, we're still alive. If we weren't here, I can't even imagine how you would have tortured our daughter after we were gone. They continued exaggerating everything, their voices growing louder. People passing by began turning their heads and looking at us. My hands hung at my sides, slowly curling into fists. Just as I was about to speak, James suddenly stepped forward. "We're going to take a family portrait. Claude, why don't you join us? In the future, I'll rely on you to help take care of Laura and the child." Laura immediately interrupted him with a disdainful sneer. "Look at his shabby appearance. If he's in the photo, it'll only lower our family's image." She turned her head and walked toward the photography studio, motioning for James to follow her. "Since that's the case, we'll leave first. Don't let us delay you from finding a job." James gave me a meaningful pat on the shoulder before following her. I watched them walk away. Surprisingly, I didn't feel anything anymore. To outsiders, they probably looked like the perfect, happy family. If this was the life Laura wanted, then what was wrong with me stepping aside and letting go? Chapter 4. 3 days before my departure, I received a message from the hospital director. He told me that the specialist I had asked him to contact was currently in the country attending a medical forum. The expert was willing to examine my father-in-law's coronary artery disease. My father-in-law had suffered from heart problems for years. Several years earlier, his condition had even become so serious that he had to be rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. That was why, while I was abroad, I had asked my colleagues to help me collect relevant medical case studies for him. After all, we had shared years together as a family. Once I helped him with this, I would owe them nothing anymore. But when my father-in-law heard that I wanted to take him to the hospital, his face immediately darkened. "Why should I go to the hospital? Are you hoping I'll drop dead? I already had heart bypass surgery, and it was successful. What else is there to check?" "There's a top heart specialist in the country today," I explained. "You should go and see him. Maybe he can recommend some preventive treatment for the future." Before I could finish, my father-in-law suddenly smashed his water cup onto the table. "You're the only one who knows how to sweet-talk people. Do you really think you can just call up a top medical expert now that you're unemployed? All you do is boast. Do you remember James? He stayed up late just to help me book an appointment with a specialist. Where were you then?" He kept comparing me to James, and his attitude made everything perfectly clear. No matter what I did, I was wrong. No matter how hard I tried, I would never measure up to James. When that thought crossed my mind, I could only smile bitterly. "Since you don't want to go, then forget it. Let it be." I was only meddling in something that no longer concerned me. Soon, the day of the baby's full moon celebration arrived. I arrived late and found the banquet hall packed with relatives whose names I could barely remember. For a moment, I stood there in a daze. The celebration was even grander than my own wedding with Laura had been. And right at the entrance of the banquet hall, they had displayed a huge family portrait. The 5 of them were standing together. As for me, from beginning to end, I was nothing more than a joke. When the relatives and friends saw me walk in, they immediately began whispering among themselves. Even without hearing their words, I could guess exactly what they were talking about. Soon, my aunt grabbed my arm and greeted me. "Claude, when did you come back? Laura never mentioned it to us." I heard you just returned from studying abroad, and that you're about to be promoted to chief physician at the hospital. Your future looks so bright. I didn't respond. I simply nodded politely, but I could clearly see the disdain in their eyes. After all, I wasn't in the family portrait. And the man who had been beside Laura throughout all of this wasn't me either. Someone nearby, who clearly seemed to know what was going on, pointed toward the man feeding Laura dessert. Claude, who's that guy? I didn't know you had a younger brother. I gave a faint smile. Laura's new husband. The aunts, who had been waiting eagerly for some gossip, immediately widened their eyes. Then they gathered together and began whispering even more excitedly. Since Laura's family didn't care about protecting the truth, why should I help them hide it? At that moment, Laura walked onto the stage and picked up the microphone. I'm so happy that everyone could join us today for my son's full moon celebration. Before this, I never thought I would become a mother. I always felt like I wouldn't be able to play the role of a mother successfully. But the moment I heard my baby crying in the delivery room, I realized just how powerful a mother's love really is. Her voice was filled with emotion, as if she were about to cry from her own words. My aunt, standing beside me, suddenly shouted, "Let the baby's father say a few words. Where is the father?" The atmosphere in the banquet hall instantly froze. Everyone's eyes shifted back and forth between James and me. The answer was already obvious. Yet my aunt seemed to be waiting for Laura to admit it herself. I met Laura's gaze. Then I slowly walked toward the stage. The moment I reached her, I took the microphone from her hand. She looked stunned. "What are you doing?" "I'm warning you. Don't say anything reckless. Otherwise, we're not done." Panic flashed across her eyes. She grabbed my sleeve and whispered the warning under her breath. But I didn't even look at her. I simply pulled my hand away. If she hadn't done anything wrong, why would she be so afraid of me bringing the truth into the open? Then I calmly raised the microphone and spoke to everyone in the hall. First, I want to thank everyone for coming to today's full moon celebration. The relatives here are the same people who watched Laura and me walk into the marriage hall together. After our wedding, I always cherished the blessings you gave us. But when you came in today, you must have noticed the family portrait displayed at the entrance. The moment she heard this, Laura's expression changed completely. Her face darkened, and she rushed toward me, trying to snatch the microphone from my hand. I quickly stepped aside and tightened my grip on the microphone. To be honest, I was shocked when I saw that portrait too. But what shocked me even more was this. After spending a year abroad, I came home to find that my wife, who had always said she didn't want children, was already 8 months pregnant. I can't accept this. Laura, let's get a divorce. Chapter 5. I pulled out the divorce agreement I had prepared long ago and threw it firmly at Laura's feet. It was something I had wanted to do ever since I discovered how close she had become to James. Laura's face instantly turned pale. She tried to take the microphone from me, hoping to regain control of the chaotic situation. At the same time, she reached out and grabbed my arm, desperately wanting to explain herself. "Claude, why can't you just let this go? Haven't I already told you? As long as you stop bringing it up, the three of us can live a good life together from now on." The three of us. In Laura's version of a 3-person family, I was the one who didn't belong. And honestly, I no longer wanted to lie to myself. Sign it. There's nothing left to say between us. I wish both of you happiness. Laura shook her head violently. I won't sign it. I don't agree to the divorce, Claude. Don't even think about it. When I first contacted a lawyer to prepare the divorce agreement, he had told me that I could potentially make Laura leave the marriage with nothing. After all, she had openly had a child with another man while we were still married. That alone was powerful evidence of infidelity. But collecting all the evidence and waiting for the court to make a ruling would take too much time. I was about to leave the country, and no matter how much money I had, there would be nowhere for me to spend it once I left. So I simply took the share of the property that rightfully belonged to me and instructed my lawyer to donate everything else to Hope schools in the mountainous regions after my departure. There was nothing left to discuss with Laura. I glanced around at the chaotic banquet hall and turned to leave. but Laura refused to accept it. She quickly handed the baby to my father-in-law and started after me. However, before she could take more than a few steps, James suddenly clutched his chest and began gasping for breath. Laura, I feel terrible. Maybe it's because of all the stress earlier. I think I'm really close to dying. James, are you all right? Hold on. I'll take you to the hospital right now. Laura could only watch as I walked away without looking back. Deep down, she told herself that once everything was over, she would have a proper conversation with me. As long as she refused to agree to the divorce, she believed our relationship would never truly end. Thinking this, Laura felt a little more at ease. The group hurriedly rushed James to the hospital. But on the way there, Laura's father suddenly experienced a dangerous increase in his heart rate because of the emotional stress. Laura nearly broke down in panic. She didn't know who she should worry about first. Just as her father was about to be wheeled into the operating room, they happened to run into the hospital director and the most authoritative heart specialist in the field. At that moment, Laura forgot about everything else. She rushed forward and dropped to her knees in front of the director. Please save my father. His condition is critical. There's a man named James who previously helped me get an appointment with you. Do you remember him? The specialist studied Laura's face for a long moment before cautiously asking, You're Claude's wife, right? Laura froze. The expert continued, He contacted me through the director earlier. He wanted me to examine his father-in-law's condition. I saw your photo on his phone, and I even praised him for being such a devoted son-in-law. But I remember he told me a couple of days ago that the examination was no longer necessary. So what happened? Laura stood completely frozen, her eyes filled with confusion and shock. All this time, they had believed that I was incapable of contacting top-tier medical experts. They had assumed that everything had been arranged by James. But now, they finally realized that they had misunderstood me from the very beginning. For a moment, Laura didn't know what to say. The director pulled her aside. With a regretful expression, he said, I'm very sorry, Miss Laura. We're about to board a flight to the United States for a medical conference. So unfortunately, we won't be able to participate in the surgery. But please rest assured, our medical team is the best in the city, and we'll do everything we can to save your father. After saying that, the director and the specialist left one after the other. I later heard from the director what happened next. Laura knelt outside the operating room, while her mother, overwhelmed with regret, angrily scolded her. I told you from the beginning, even if Claude was shameless, he would never joke about something like this. You refused to believe him, and now look what's happened. If anything happens to your father, you'll be the one responsible. Her furious shouting made the baby in her arms start crying loudly. My mother-in-law angrily placed the child on a nearby plastic chair. Stop crying. You cry all day long. If I didn't know any better, I'd think I had given birth to a little emperor. But Laura was no longer paying attention to anything around her. She slowly pulled out her phone, wanting to call me. Perhaps now, I was the only person who could contact the specialist and arrange the surgery for her father. But her call never went through. By then, I was already on a plane heading abroad. I rested my head against the window and watched the scenery outside slowly disappear into the distance. Then, with the force of the plane lifting off, we rose into the blue sky. I felt an indescribable sense of unreality. From that moment on, I no longer had a nationality. I was dedicating myself to the world. Chapter 6. After more than 10 hours of flying, my companion and I finally landed, both of us completely exhausted. The scene here was nothing like the peaceful environment I had left behind. This place was filled with war and armed forces. Here, one wrong move could cost you your life. While we rested inside the car, our team leader began explaining the situation at our destination. At the same time, he handed each of us a gun. Saving lives is important, he said. But more important than the mission itself is your own life. His words struck me deeply. Suddenly, I thought about the years I had spent married to Laura. I had treated her as if she were my entire world. Back then, wasn't she more important to me than my own life? Soon we reached our destination. Along the muddy road, countless wounded people were sitting on the ground. Their arms and legs were covered in bloody injuries. I learned that the area had just been hit by a bombing. The wounds on these people were horrifying, and yet they were actually the ones who had suffered the least severe injuries in the disaster. The operating rooms were already full. So many of the injured had been forced to wait along the roadside. At that moment, I pushed every other thought out of my mind and rushed over to help bandage their wounds. This was only the beginning. Over the following months, every day felt as though it were reshaping the way I saw the world. But more importantly, it made me even more determined to follow the path I had chosen. I never regretted coming here, and I never regretted becoming a doctor without borders. Then, one afternoon, a colleague came rushing toward me, completely out of breath. "Someone is looking for you." I assumed it was just another patient and was about to step outside when he added, "I think she's from back home. A woman." My footsteps suddenly faltered. Laura's face immediately flashed through my mind. Before I could even refuse to see her, Laura had already entered. "Claude, it's really you." Her eyes were red as she rushed toward me and wrapped her arms around me. I could feel her tears against my neck. I awkwardly pushed her away. Then I remembered the message my lawyer had sent me right before I boarded the plane. He had told me that the divorce proceedings had officially been filed. Regardless of whether Laura agreed to the divorce, legally, our marriage would be dissolved within a month. So why was she here now? "Laura, we're already divorced." She looked at me through tear-filled eyes. "You know, after you left, a lot happened. My father," her voice broke. "He passed away." I froze for a moment. I had been completely caught off guard. I never expected Laura's father to die. "I'm sorry. We didn't believe you back then. We thought you were lying." But the person who was actually lying to us was James. He never went to find any top-tier specialists. My father's condition was ignored the entire time. If we had listened to you and consulted an expert, maybe he would still be alive. As she said this, Laura slowly crouched down and covered her face. She began crying uncontrollably. I stood there without moving, a tightness forming in my chest. During the month I had spent here, I had witnessed countless moments between life and death. I thought I had already become numb to it. But hearing Laura say those words still stirred something deep inside me. After all, my father-in-law had once been kind to me. Laura looked up at me through her tears. "I'm sorry, Claude. I've been looking everywhere for you. I wanted to apologize to you in person. I didn't understand back then that you hadn't simply left because you were angry. You left because you wanted to become a doctor without borders. That's why I came all the way here to find you. Please, come back with me. This place is too dangerous. I've already lost my father. I can't lose you too." Chapter 7. I slowly shook my head. "No, I'm not going back. As a doctor without borders, I no longer belong to any country. Where would I even go back to? Unless the war ends and there is no longer a place in the world that needs our help, only then will I consider returning home. Until then, this vast world, and anywhere in it, will be my home. I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have lied to you. I shouldn't have been so self-righteous, and I shouldn't have had a child. Now I've paid the price. James is in bad condition. The doctors said he might not have much longer. Claude, how am I supposed to raise this child alone? You promised me you would protect me for the rest of my life." I forcefully pulled my hands away from hers. "We're divorced now, Laura. How you choose to live your life from this point forward is your business. I still have things to do. This place is dangerous. You should go back home." After saying that, I turned and started walking toward the camp. "If you won't go back, then neither will I. I'll stay here with you. Whenever you finish your mission, we can go back together." I didn't respond to her. I simply kept walking. But after I had taken only a few steps, I heard Laura answer her phone. It seemed to be a call from a hospital back home. "What? James is dead. I'm coming back right now. Please everyone wait for me." At that exact moment, 2 bombers suddenly flew overhead. The familiar sound of their engines made my instincts take over. I immediately threw Laura to the ground. "Claude, are you crazy?" Her scream was quickly drowned out by a nearby explosion. The ground shook violently beneath us, and dust and debris from the blast rained down around us. I ignored her shouting and slowly lifted my head, quickly scanning the surroundings. Then I scrambled to my feet. Laura, clearly terrified by the sudden attack, remained frozen on the ground. I glanced at her and pulled her up. "We need to get inside. We need to find cover." I had long since become accustomed to the life-threatening bombings that were an everyday part of life here. But for Laura, this was completely new. Her lips trembled. "Am I going to die here?" I pressed my lips together and remained silent for a moment. Then I finally answered, "I'll have the team leader arrange for someone to take you back later. Don't come here again." Laura's face was covered in dust. She clutched her phone tightly and remained silent. Soon, the team leader arranged for a local driver to take her away. He was driving an old pickup truck and gestured for Laura to hurry and get inside. Before she left, I quietly slipped a couple of bills into the driver's hand and reminded him, "Make sure she gets to the airport safely." Even though our relationship had come to an end, I couldn't simply stand by and watch someone die without helping. Laura didn't say anything. She still seemed to be in shock from the attack. When I turned around again, I saw her quickly getting into the truck. I gave a faint smile, almost as if I had already expected her reaction. Back at the camp, one of my colleagues walked over, clearly eager to gossip. "Is that beautiful woman your girlfriend? She came all the way here just to find you. Sounds like true love, huh?" "Not like my girlfriend. She broke up with me the moment she found out I was going abroad to provide medical aid and immediately found some young stud instead." "But hey, why didn't your girlfriend come back with you?" I quietly put away my lunchbox and casually replied, "She's not my girlfriend. She's my ex-wife." My colleague froze for a moment. After that, he didn't ask any more questions. I quickly pushed the matter out of my mind. 2 years later, an unexpected opportunity gave me the chance to return home. By then, my understanding of medicine had deepened considerably. And this time, I wasn't returning alone. My girlfriend was coming back with me. We had met at the camp. She had been disfigured while protecting me, and I had promised to take care of her for the rest of my life. Over time, I realized that my feelings for her had grown into something much deeper. Perhaps it was fate. Maybe, after seeing how lonely I had been, fate had finally brought someone into my life who was meant to stay. This time, I would make sure I never let go of this bond. When I returned to the country, the former director of the Central Hospital personally came to the airport to welcome me. He looked at me with a satisfied smile. "You've gotten a little darker and thinner. These past 2 years must have been tough on you." His simple words made my heart skip a beat. I fought back my tears and opened my arms to hug him. But just as I took a few steps forward, I saw Laura in the distance. She was holding a young boy's hand. She must have found out through someone that I was returning and had come to the airport to see me. In just 2 short years, Laura had changed a lot. She no longer looked as bright and beautiful as she once had. Instead, her face carried a deep weariness. She didn't approach me. I simply stood there, expressionless, watching her from a distance. My girlfriend seemed to sense something. She took my hand and gently intertwined her fingers with mine. "Is that your ex-wife? Should we go over and say hello? It looks like she has a lot she wants to say to you." I withdrew my gaze and gently shook my head. "There's nothing to say." From the moment I walked out of that banquet hall during the baby's full moon celebration, our paths had already gone in different directions. There was nothing left between us to discuss. I turned away and got into the car. Not long after we left, I received a message from Laura. Over the past 2 years, she had sent me several messages. But because I hadn't been using a domestic phone number, I had never received any of them. The message she had sent just moments ago contained only 3 words. "I'm sorry." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I deleted the message and blocked her number. Finally, I threw the broken phone card out of the window. Just like that, I cast away the mistakes of my past, and all the affection I had once placed in the wrong person.